this talk and welcoming you all to the Lisa Early Career Scientist calls. So first off, this is the first call I think that we've had since the official new Lisa Consortium kickoff. So to returning members who were in the old Lisa Consortium, welcome back. And for those new members who may have just joined because of the new consortium, welcome. We have these calls monthly, and usually we give a little bit of an update and then we have a talk. Sometimes the talks are research talks by other early career scientists. Sometimes, like today, it'll be more like professional development talks. Please let us know what you guys would like to get from these talks, anything you'd like to hear. Hey, Jake, can you mute yourself, please?
Sorry.
All right. Yeah, let us know what you guys would like to hear. And also, please volunteer to give talks. This is a great opportunity for you to hop on one of these and tell people about your research. Good for getting your papers out there, and also good practice because this is a very chill, non-intimidating environment. I know everyone always says like this isn't intimidating, and it still is, but it's less intimidating than other things. So I definitely encourage you to take advantage of that. Other updates. So with the new consortium kicking off, there are a lot of working groups that are also really starting to get into full swing. So I would really encourage you guys to find any of the scientific working groups that you are interested in and get involved with them. Many of them are having kickoff meetings. Some of those may have already happened, but I know like the Waveform working group, for example, at least either recorded it or sent out slides. So if you missed it, you can hopefully still find the information. And many of them starting to organize projects. And so it would be a good time to get into things right now. There's always time later, but now is just kind of an optimal time. And then real quick, I'll pass it over to Florentina to talk about the mentorship program.
Yes, hi everyone. Just like Deborah said, welcome back or just welcome. When it comes to the mentorship program, for those of you who are older in the LEX group, you may already have heard that we do this every year. It's a program where we pair mentors and mentees, so basically more senior researchers with more junior researchers to help them with their non-scientific, let's say, challenges they may encounter in academia, like job life balance, moving to another country for studying how to make their applications right, and so on. The mentorship program of this year just wrapped up like a month ago, but there is going to be a new round in fall. So in case you are interested in being a mentee, or you know someone who might benefit from this, or even if you want to become a mentor or know someone who might be a great mentor, please keep an eye on the email for when the calls for mentors and mentees will start. And of course, if you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we will give you all the details you may need. Okay, I think this was all I wanted to say on my part from this. Deborah?
Great. All right. Thanks, Valentina. So today we have Lance Cooper giving us a talk. He is the Associate Head for Graduate Programs at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And today he's going to give us some advice and guidance on the faculty application process, how to prepare your materials. A lot of this will also hopefully be applicable to other types of things you may be applying to, postdocs, fellowships, etc. And he's encouraged you guys to interrupt and ask questions during the talk, as well as there will be time for questions at the end. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lance.
Great. Thanks, Deborah. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Let me know if you can't. As Deborah said, this is a discussion of writing research and teaching statements, but it's a very useful set of discussions for a wide variety of aspects of applications for faculty positions, from the interview process to negotiations, and even for grad students who are interested in postdoctoral positions. Yeah, even for later when you apply for proposals, these are all relevant discussions because there's a lot of commonality between research statements and how you have to draft proposals, how you have to give address interview questions. So it's widely applicable to a wide variety of things, and I'll touch on these things as well. But again, as Deborah said, please feel free to interrupt and jump in if you have specific questions. So let me start by talking about research statements. Just a general statement about what a research statement is. It's a concise overview of the entire plan you have for your research as a faculty member or as a postdoc, covering motivations, methods, and specific plans for your research. It's applied in a variety of contexts. Of course, faculty job applications is one of the main things that we're thinking about today. Most tenure track faculty positions require a research statement. But also more generally, as I said, if you're applying for various postdoctoral fellowship applications, will require some sort of research statement. Includes the National Research Council. Various named postdoctoral fellowships will require a research statement about what your plans are if you get that postdoctoral fellowship. So this is something that even grad students might be thinking about. And as I mentioned, proposals will often require something called a white paper, where you will submit a plan for your research proposal before you will even be invited to submit a proposal. This is a much more common, becoming increasingly common approach, so that you have to actually get invited to submit a full proposal by submitting a 1 or 2 page a research statement about what your proposal plan is. So this is becoming increasingly common as a first line review of what your research plan is before getting invited to give a full proposal as a faculty member. So research statements basically outline in detail your research plan, and usually, and I've been on a number of faculty hiring committees. Usually, this is the first thing we look at to decide whether you should be invited to included on a short list or even invited for an interview. This is one of the first things that we look at as sort of a detailed summary of what the plan is and how much overlap there is between what your goals are and what we're looking for as a hiring committee. It's also very useful for you because it really forces you to think in detail, and we'll get into some specifics about what goes into the research statement, but it forces you to think in detail about what your plan is. Is your plan feasible? What's the timeline of things? When do you plan to implement different stages of your research? And sort of outline the detailed things that you will need, your special abilities and skills, and how they overlap with what the department is looking for in specific applications. So ideally, your research plan, it can be very complicated because you want to combine a number of things in your research plan. Of course, you would hope that what you're going to be planning is something that you're interested in, but you also have to have an eye toward what funding agencies are looking for. So hopefully the things that you're interested in are also consistent with what specific funding agencies are willing to fund. And this is something that's important because I think departments are going to be looking not only at how excited they are about your research plan, but whether you have the capability to get funded down the line for that research. It's also got to overlap with your expertise. So hopefully you're not completely changing research direction so that you have some ability to convince people that you have the expertise to conduct the plans that you have. And you also have to convince people, because often you're going to be giving talks to groups that are outside your field. They may not necessarily buy into the motivations and benefits of what you're planning to do. So you have to convince them that you have an important scientific or technical question that will have broader impact and that will impress people even outside your field. Because often when you're applying to departments, you're going to be applying to a large group of people who are going to be not necessarily specialists in your area. So one of the things that it's very important to do is to be aware of, a research plan is really going to be tailored to specific departments. So you're not going to have a one-size-fits-all research plan that you'll submit everywhere. You really need to investigate what specific departments or institutions are looking for and tailor your research plan to some extent to those particular institutes or departments. So, for example, what's the research focus and strengths of the department? If possible, can you find out what research areas the department wants to strengthen? Are there special campus or institutional resources that are on campus that you can tap into and leverage and argue that you can make stronger by your research plan? You want to know specific details. At least in the U.S., there are various different universities and colleges, and they have different balances between education, graduate education, research. You need to know what that balance is in every specific department you're applying to, so that you can tailor your research plan to, are you going to be engaging undergraduate research? Are you going to be primarily dealing with graduate research? What's the balance there in each specific department? So knowing that helps you tailor your specific research plan to the specific institution you're applying to. How important are collaborative grants to departments? Are you expected to sort of interact with other people in the department? Are you going to be running something, sort of an individual program, which is not coupling in necessarily to others? Is it important that you have industry connections? These are all things that may be hard to identify. And one thing we can talk about is how you find out this kind of information, particularly if you know somebody in the department, that you can get some of this inside information that can be very useful in tailoring your research plan. So it's very useful to know what departments look for. So this is a kind of a poor reproduction, but this is a rubric that I stole off the internet based on a candidate evaluation. And it can give you a very good insight into what people are looking for. How are you being evaluated when you submit your research plan, when you give your interview? And you can see that the things that are important to different institutions based on what rubric they have are used to evaluate. So you can see here that they're going to, of course, be looking at your scholarly impact, your productivity. Have you been funded in terms of the research? You can see here matched to departmental priorities. So this is what I just mentioned, that it's very important that you will be aware of what the priorities of the department are, so that you can couple into that in terms of your research statement. They're going to be concerned about collegiality and your collaborative ability. They want to know whether they're going to be hiring you potentially for a long-term 10, 20-year career. They want to know that they can get along with you and collaborate with you if possible. They want to know that you're capable of recruiting and supervising graduate students, or otherwise you're not going to get your research off the ground. So these are all ways of seeing what typical departments are interested in behind the scenes when you're being evaluated, and knowing these kinds of things helps you tailor your research statement to address these issues at the very outset. So what are the potential significance of your research, or things that you need to address in your research statement? So does your research plan, you need to convince faculty members in the department or the institution that the research plan addresses important problems. And of course, bearing in mind that the faculty members that may be on the hiring committees may not be in your area. So you need to convince them that what you're doing is important, even though they're not necessarily in your area. What significant advancements will result if the research aims are achieved? What are the impacts of your research in different subfields? Are things that you're going to do potentially of impact to different areas of the field that you're in, or even society at large? One very important thing that they're going to be asking is, what's the feasibility of your research plan? So they're going to want some details as to, well, whether your research plan is well developed, is it well reasoned? Are there going to be, have you taken into consideration potential roadblocks to your plan? If there are roadblocks, do you have alternative approaches to get around these roadblocks? So this is something that's common in proposals as well, but I think they're going to want to know this in a research plan. Something we can talk about later. When you give if you're given an opportunity to give an interview, often the interview process involves a couple of talks, at least commonly in the US. You're commonly giving sort of a broader research talk to the entire department or the entire institute, but then you're also given a more focused research plan, maybe to the hiring committee. And in those talks, they can get very detailed and specific about questions they're going to have about, how are you going to implement the plans that you have? What are the potential roadblocks? What are the potential things that you can run into? How are you going to get funded? These are all things that you might get asked in these kinds of interviews. So having thought about that beforehand is very important. One thing that's very important, as I've already alluded to, is, what are the potential collaborations? One thing that I remember one of our faculty members, when we were hiring an incoming faculty member, one of their comments was, I want to bring in somebody who's going to make who's going to help my research be stronger. Faculty are going to want to know whether you can collaborate with them, whether you can be added to collaborative block grant applications, whether you're going to be somebody they can talk to on a regular basis and interact with in research. And so you investigating what people do in the departments that you're applying to is very important. And then having your research plan propose various collaborations. I was on a recent hiring committee last year, and when we had Zoom interviews of the faculty members, one of the questions we asked them were who are the people that you can potentially interact with if you're hired here. So they're going to want to know what specific people you can collaborate with, and having some knowledge of the department and knowing what they do and how you might interact with them is very important in these in these research plans that you're going to propose. People are going to be wondering about the level of originality in the research. They're going to want to know, for example, one other common question you get in interviews is, who are your main competitors? How are you going to stand apart from the competition? If you're in a particularly competitive field, how are you going to stand out? How original is your plan, and how able are you to stand apart from competitive groups that are in the same field? So is your research plan original and innovative? Are you going to use novel techniques, concepts, approaches to tackle problems? Because people are going to want to know whether or not you can compete in sometimes a very busy field with other people in other departments, not only for funding, but in terms of getting your research published. What are your qualifications? So you're going to have a research plan, but what is it about you that enables you to conduct the plan that you're going to propose? Do you have access to specific techniques? Do you have specific training? What are the things that set you apart from others? And this can be in the form of you have special collaborations, and that might be with the department you're applying to or other collaborations. That may be facilities that you have access to that others don't. These are things that sort of set you apart in terms of your qualifications. One thing that you want to look for is, are you this is relevant to the places you apply to. You want to make sure that the departments you're applying to or the institutions you're applying to are actually suitable for your research plan. Does the department have the resources in terms of availability of space? Do they have any staff support that you need? Do they have the students that you need? Do they if you have research that requires grad students or postdocs, then maybe applying to a primarily undergraduate institution may not be your best option. Do they have facilities that you need, or are there facilities you can have access to that are going to enable your project? So this is something that you're going to pay attention to in terms of where you apply, because I think they're going to be aware, each department's going to be aware of what their resources are, what their limitations are. So if you propose something which is well outside of their capabilities in terms of their resources, then you at the very least need to provide other ways of getting access to those resources that don't require that institution. And again, does your project take advantage of collaborative opportunities within the department or within the university? So these are the kinds of people that you're going to expect to be reading your research plan. So you're going to be speaking to a wide variety of people. I mean, often you think that you're just only communicating with a hiring committee, and you might be under the misconception that the hiring committee is going to be made up of experts in your field. That's really not the case. So in addition to committee members who are going to be making the final decisions, who could be from various fields, the department head is likely to have input to this. Certainly college deans will have input. Other departmental faculty members will have input. And there might even be external reviewers that are asked to weigh in on your research plan. So there's a wide range of people that could be making comments on your research plan. And so you can't assume a specific set of knowledge of what of your particular field. So you need to make sure that you write an accessible research plan that people can understand, and that you don't assume knowledge or assume that people are going to buy into your motivation and the importance of what you do. You need to sell that to them, assuming that they may not know much about what your basic field is and what the motivations for your field are. So again, the majority of your audience won't necessarily have expertise. So you need to motivate the importance of your research. You need to clearly explain your methods and goals, and you need to emphasize the significance and impact of what you propose to do. So maybe I'll pause here and see if there are any questions about what I've already said before. Okay. If not, so the general content of a research statement is, you can think of this in terms of the fundamental questions of what, why, who, how. You know, what research do you propose to do? Why is it important to do this research? Why are you in particular the right person to do this research? How do you plan to accomplish the research? How will you know if the research is successful, and how feasible is the research plan? And incidentally, the reason why the research statement is such a nice thing to talk about and understand is because these are the same kinds of questions that you need to answer usually in an interview process, that you will need to address in a proposal that you will write once you become a faculty member. And so these are good things to think about now and be able to sort of address even when you're applying for positions. How will you fund your research? How much startup funding will you need? And what are the benefits if you're able to succeed in your plans? What's the broader impact of your in terms of your department, in terms of the community, in terms of the field in general, the benefits of the research that you're about to propose to do? So these are all questions that at some point you would like to try to address, and it can be very challenging because often a research plan is limited to 2 or 3 pages at most. So being very succinct and clear can be challenging to address a lot of these questions. So this is basically a short, the statement is a synopsis of what your broader research proposal might be if you were to write a proposal about this. So specific issues that you might address are, do you have any funding history? Do you have any success in funding? Faculty hiring committees are going to be very concerned about whether or not you're able to get funding for the research that you're going to propose. So if you have any funding history, that's something that's good to bring up. They're going to want to know what your specific requirements are, because they're going to want to know, do we have the resources, or do we have the ability to fund or provide startup funds for the requirements that you have? So that it can be for equipment, for space needs, for other resources that you might need, including human resources like students and postdocs. What potential collaborations do you have inside and outside the institution? Something I've already addressed several times. How does your research contribute to your field, the department as a whole? And again, as I already mentioned, how will you distinguish yourself from competitors in the field? Rarely are you the only person in the field, and so you're going to need to convey how you, as in terms of your collaborations or the resources or facilities you have available, how can you distinguish yourself from others? You want to structure your research statement so that it's easy to read, because again, people are not necessarily going to be in your field or experts. So having a clear paragraph structure with well-defined sections, using a concise writing style, keep your sentences short, use boldface headings to identify key sections, which makes it easier for hiring committees to review these things. Highlight key phrases you want to make sure to convey. Having been on these hiring committees many times, I want to sort of impress upon you that often we're reading 100 of these things, and so it can get by the time you get to the 30th or 40th application, your eyes can kind of glare over, and so making it easy for the reviewers to evaluate and get the key points from what you're doing can benefit you greatly, because hiring committees are having to read through a lot of these things, and you want to make it easy for them to understand what's most important about what you're trying to propose. So here's an example research statement, which I think is fairly well done. This was a successful research statement. The person eventually got hired. So they start off with a paragraph of the overview and motivation for the research. They provide some essential background information, which conveys to the hiring committee their knowledge of the field, and again, people who might be evaluating this from outside of the expertise of this particular applicant. And then some specific questions that they intend to address and the specific tasks that they will pursue in order to address those questions. Maybe some examples of previous results that they have to demonstrate their capability to do the kinds of things that they're doing. This is a big figure. Figures can take up a lot of space, and again, you don't want to have more than 2 or 3 pages. So you have to sort of use these kinds of figures sparingly. And then you can see they cleverly put a timeline. Having a timeline in a proposal or in a research statement can be very good. It tells the committee that you've thought very carefully about when are you going to implement the different stages of the tasks that you're planning. One of the common questions you get on an interview is, okay, what's the first thing you're going to do if you get here? What's your first task? And so having a timeline where you've at least thought about what you're going to do and what stages you're going to do them can be very useful. And this person sort of cleverly did this vertically to try to save some space. Often they're going to want a specific proposed budget, including real numbers of how much money is it going to cost. The departments are going to want to know how much they're going to be expected to provide in startup funds to get you going. I've seen proposed budgets that have kind of a high-end budget, which is, and then maybe since you may not know exactly how much the department is willing to provide, they have a secondary budget where they cut out certain things or they delay certain tasks at a lower cost. So that's something you might also want to consider doing, particularly if you're not sure about what the sort of startup funding level of that department or institution is. So things that you want to avoid in research statements. I think being overly ambitious or overhyping the work can be something to avoid. I think hiring committees are usually very experienced at seeing when you are over promising things that you don't think you can do, either because of the resources that are available at the department or because of your particular expertise. So you want to be, you obviously want to be exciting about what you're doing, but you don't want to go over the top. A lack of specificity can be a killer for research statements or proposals. If you propose big things with sort of high-end kinds of exciting statements, but don't then follow up with specific plans on how you're going to achieve that, then that can come across as that you haven't thought carefully about what it really takes to implement plans that you have. Not having a clear research direction, lack of a clear organized plan. These are things that are noticed very commonly by hiring committees. You need to have a very compelling story. What is it about what you're planning to do that is going to have big impact? And again, this is true when you write papers as well as proposals and research statements. You want to have come across with a compelling fact-based, of course, story that you want to tell about what you're planning to do. That captures people's attention much more readily than just a series of disconnected facts. A lack of clarity on how you will couple into interact with the rest of the department or the group you're applying to. So you want to be clear, you want to name specific people that you know that they do things that are analogous, and there's a potential for you to couple into what they do. People love to hear that they can potentially be part of things that you plan to do. And I think having some knowledge of that by investigating the departments can be very useful to do. You want to avoid having a jargon-filled statement that, again, keeping in mind that the people you're going to be talking to may not be experts. And so if you lose them very early, and their vote may count just as much as anybody else on the committee or in the department. So if you lose them by not taking into account the fact that they don't understand the particular technical terms in your field, you can lose their vote. So avoid jargon-filled statements that aren't accessible to non-experts among the committee members that are going to be voting for hiring you. If you don't take into consideration what potential funding opportunities there are, that's very important. It's very common for interview committees to be asking, okay, what are the potential funding sources for the research that you want to do? Typographical and grammatical errors. Have somebody outside your field, a friend, a collaborator, an advisor, have them read through your research plan to avoid typographical and grammatical errors. Have a backup plans for what you plan to for potential roadblocks in your plan, so that people think first of all are aware that you acknowledge that there are potential roadblocks, and that you have at least thought about potential ways of getting around these roadblocks in case they come up. So typically, as I've been saying, your research statement is limited to 2 to 3 pages, excluding references. Again, use informative headings and subheadings so that people can immediately latch on to what different sections they're on. Use easily readable fonts and font sizes to make it easy on them, given that they're going to be reading dozens of these different proposals. Make it easy for them to understand and follow what you're doing. Use a clear paragraph structure with one idea per paragraph. Use sparingly diagrams, figures, and tables to convey complex information. When you're writing things for proposals, sometimes I commonly see people will use these kind of vague terms like "I plan to do this," or "I hope to do this," or "I might do this," and you want to get rid of that language. You want to say, "This is what we will do." Make it very clear, and sometimes this runs counter to our tendency to be a little bit more cautious. And scientists and engineers tend to be a little bit less maybe aggressive in terms of the way they phrase things. But in proposals, you really want to be confident about what you plan to do and what you will do. So use that kind of language in your proposals. Write clearly and concisely as possible. Your research plan will typically cover the next 5 years or so, even though that is very questionable, over a period of 5 years. Funding changes, but you typically want to have at least 3 to 5 years is what your research plan will cover. Going longer than that is people are going to be very skeptical about whether you will really understand the funding environment beyond 3 to 5 years. but you certainly want to extend it for at least a few years and have a clear timeline indicating what you will do in each project that you plan. So these are some of the good resources for research statements that you might consult that are very useful. This Making the Right Moves booklet is extremely valuable for potential faculty members. It's something that's very useful, so I can highly recommend it. This Tomorrow's Professor is not only useful in terms of writing research statements, but also in terms of how to navigate your first years as a faculty member. So these are good references you might consult later. So I have a little bit more about teaching statements that I'll comment on, but I'll pause here if anybody has questions about specifically about research statements.
Yeah, I have a quick question. How do you know when you're, hyping up your work too much versus trying to, make your work look strong? How do you toe that line?
I mean, that's a very subjective thing.
Okay.
I think you just have to be. I think if you're going to make a big statement about something, you need to back it up with a real plan to address to get there, right? I mean, I think I think it's really the specificity. So it's fine to be bold in what you're saying, that the potential impact of what you want to do is big, but I think if you're going to do that, you need to sort of have a fairly clear plan of how you think you're going to get to where you want to go with that. Just stating something which may potentially have a huge impact and leaving it at that is what will be called out by hiring committees as not being specific enough in terms of how you address things. So I agree, it's a very tricky tightrope to walk because you want to make it clear that what you're going to do is very important and has potential impact, but you also don't want to go overboard and start making claims because again, the people that you're talking to, some of them are going to be not experts, but they're also going to be experts and they're going to be skeptical about whether or not you can accomplish things. So I think you better have a specific plan that suggests that you can actually achieve what you're planning.
Thank you.
Good question.
And we've got
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say we have a hand up from Deb Nandini.
Hi, thank you for all of this. So my question is, whatever you described just now, the example of the research statement that you showed us seems to be perfect for proposals or for fellowship applications, which have a very time bound, which basically has a 5 to 7 year time constraint on them. And there's one project you're proposing and you have specific aims and so on. But usually for postdoctoral or tenure track applications, the research statement that we write, usually the advice I've gotten in the past is like you summarize your past research projects in a few paragraphs, 2 or 3. Then you summarize your present research projects in 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then under future projects, which is what you're proposing, you describe your proposed projects, and there could be multiple, and show connections with what the department is doing, and possibly have some of the side projects in bullet points. So that's the type of advice I've gotten in the past, rather than talk about one project and very clearly define very specific goals. So basically, how would you differentiate between the two types of research statements, the ones that are for proposals and fellowship applications, and ones for postdoc and faculty applications?
Yeah, I don't think what I'm saying is any different than what you described. I mean, I think it is. I mean, maybe the balance, maybe the distribution of those different things. I think when you apply for a postdoctoral position with a research statement, or you apply for a faculty position, they're certainly going to want to know what you've done. That's how you establish your credibility as a researcher, by showing what you've done. And they're certainly going to, and that would include what you've done in the past as well as what you've done in the present. And then you're going to want to talk about what you plan to do. I mean, my instinct though is that and there's again a subjectivity to the balance of those things. I would say you want to talk more, and what I've been talking about in the research plan is not necessarily just one plan you have when you go into detail. It could be multiple projects you have in mind over a course of 3 to 5 years, and and you just have to go into detail with each of those different projects. But as to how much emphasis you have on what you've done in the past or what you're currently doing versus what you plan to do, my instinct is that if you go into too much detail about what you've done in the past and what you're currently doing, then I think you're resting too much on your past success and not demonstrating enough about what you're going to do in the next 3 to 5 years. And so I think it's, again, there's a gray area in terms of how much you want to balance those two things. But I do think it's important that the emphasis be on your future plans. Because I think if you emphasize too much what you've done or what you are doing currently, the review committees are not going to have enough information about I mean, 3 to 5 years is a long time. And so, and for a postdoc, you may be 2 to 3 years. So even that is a long time. And so I think you want to be clear about how you're going to, use that time and what your plans are, and with some specificity about how you're going to achieve those plans. And so I think, the balance should be more emphasizing your future plans rather than what you've done in the past. But it's certainly important to talk about what your past work is, because that establishes you as a researcher. But I think, very often hiring committees can see what you're doing, because you're very often going to be providing a CV, with a publication list. So they're going to, know, and very often they may even know who you are. They may already know about your work. So I think overemphasizing what your past work done at the expense of what you're planning to do can, in my opinion, can be something to be careful about. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other questions before I start saying a little bit more about teaching statements? Okay, so this would be a bit quicker because I think there's a lot of commonality between research and teaching statements. And teaching statements are very common. Again, this is not something you would typically see for a postdoc application, although there are some postdocs that will incorporate teaching as part of it, and this is becoming increasingly common. So you might be asked for a teaching statement as part of a postdoc application, but certainly for a faculty application, teaching is becoming more, at least in the US, becoming more and more an important component of what faculty hiring committees look for when they're hiring people. So this is intended to convey, what experiences you have about teaching, what your philosophy of teaching is, and gives the committee an opportunity to sort of see what your teaching experience might be, what your objectives and teaching methods are. Again, generally these are 2 to 3 pages long. They're generally written in the first person, and they clearly communicate what your teaching philosophy is, what your interest in teaching is. They again should be written in the same format as a research statement, where they have section headings and subheadings to sort of break the statement into clearly defined topics. That makes it easier to read. And they should include specific plans, maybe specific courses that you'd like to teach, specific courses you'd like to develop, and how these couple into the existing teaching efforts of the department. So a teaching statement typically addresses, why do you want to teach? Why do you like teaching? What are your objectives as a teacher? How do you plan to achieve those objectives? How will you evaluate your effectiveness? What methods do you use when you to motivate the learning for students? And what specific courses are you interested in? Again, in the hiring committee that I was on last year, this was one of the questions we had: is what courses would you like to develop, or what courses would you like to teach? And we kind of expected them to know what courses that we offered. So it's a good idea to investigate for each institution. What courses do they not have that you might be able to add, or what courses are they teaching that you think you have a specific ability to contribute to. So you want to talk a little bit about your teaching background, and you might have to think broadly. I know it's not uncommon for postdocs and grad students maybe not to have so much teaching experience. If you've been on a fellowship, if you've been a postdoctoral fellow, you might not have much teaching experience. So you have to think broadly about your teaching. That could be mentoring graduate students, that could be mentoring undergraduates in groups. That could be outreach activities that you do that are outside of the conventional classroom. So you can think broadly about talking about your background in teaching. If you've taught, what specific strategies have you employed? Give specific examples of what you've done if you have those. So the more specificity you can provide, the better, if you do have any experiences, to give people some real concrete evidence that you actually have some background in teaching if you do have that. Again, you want to structure your teaching statement in a way that makes it very easy to read. So that's a clear paragraph structure, well-defined sections, bold headings to identify key sections, highlighting key phrases that you might want to highlight, keeping in mind that review committees have read dozens of these, and so you want to make it clear that they catch key phrases that they should pay attention to. This is another good example of a teaching statement that was successful. Very clear sectioning, talking about past experiences, what they did, talking, and this includes not only conventional teaching, but also more unconventional teaching and outreach activities. This could include research student mentoring. That can be included in a teaching statement as well. What are your teaching interests? What's your philosophy of teaching? And then what are your future teaching plans and goals? So this would couple specifically into specific courses that the department might offer or doesn't offer that you think you could add because of your specific research experience or teaching experience. Things to avoid, again, vague teaching goals. You want to be as specific as possible. Vague teaching goals, vague research goals, vague teaching goals come across as you didn't think very carefully about what you want to do, and that's why specificity is always beneficial in these statements, so that you follow up a broad, big impact statement with some specific statements about how you're going to achieve those goals. If you try to come up with some good examples of your teaching experience, if you have them. Again, like any research and teaching statement, you want to avoid overly technical and jargon-filled statements that won't be understood by general people who are going to be contributing to the evaluation of your statements. Again, just like you would go and investigate what the research environment is at the departments you're applying to, you also want to be aware of what the teaching philosophy and opportunities in the department. How important is teaching to this specific department? What programs do they have for teaching? Being able to cite those programs can be very impressive to departments that you actually paid attention to what they're doing and how you might couple into those and leverage whatever exists at that department to enhance your own teaching abilities. And then again, trying to avoid typographical and grammatical errors if possible. So here are some other links to teaching statements that you might consult that are very useful, I think, in terms of giving you some guidance in how to write a research statement and a teaching statement. So I think that's it. I'm happy to answer questions about anything related to faculty or postdoc hiring and even beyond what we've stated here. So feel free to reach out and ask questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Lance. We're gonna do that awkward clap thing where on Zoom, all right, I already see some hands up. So Dominica, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, hello everyone. Hello, Lance. Thank you
Hi.
for the presentation. I was curious, like sometimes teaching responsibilities have different names in different parts of the world. So, do you think it's better to keep the original label and then try to translate this to the label in the specific country, or is it better to not try to translate this but just like describe the original label of the position to kind of like give an idea of what were the responsibilities? How will you think it's better to approach this kind of discrepancies?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, if you're applying in a country that uses that specific label and you're sure that's who's going to be evaluating it, then I think you can probably get away with just using that label. But I think in general, if you did teaching in somewhere in South America and you're applying in the U.S., I would use that label, but then I would define what it is. What were the responsibilities? That's always the safest thing to do because and even if you think that most people are going to understand what that label means, I think it's always a good idea if you have the space to define what the responsibilities are so that it's clear. That's always the safest thing so that I do agree it's a good idea to use um, to use the specific name um, just so people know what it is. But I think it's always better to define the responsibilities so people know exactly what you did. And that could be true even in the US, right? Where different institutions may have different things that they use, or and again, that could be you could consider these specific labels as jargon in the sense that most people may not know what it means that are going to be evaluating your application. So it's always better to define what that program or what that specific activity was, so they know the specific responsibilities as clearly as possible.
Thank you.
Great. I also see that Robbie has a hand up.
Oh, hi. Thanks for a nice talk. Yeah, I guess my question was just wondering about uh, which jobs to apply to. Is it good to have a prior relationship with some people at the department, or just to apply cold, or yeah, is it best to wait for a job that comes up that seems like a good fit, or things like that?
Well, look, I think I would apply as broadly as possible. I mean, I think you want to define your search in terms of um, where you think you can actually have impact. I certainly wouldn't just apply to places where I have some previous contact, because we get many applications where we may not know exactly we may not know the person or who the person's worked for, and they can be very strong applicants. I think it's always better to have a broad search, a broad application. Throw your applications as broadly as possible, because you can always narrow that later, right? I mean, if you start getting lots of on lots of short lists or lots of interviews, you can always cut that back at that time. But why restrict your search at the early stages? And because you don't know necessarily whether or not you're going to like the institution, or so give yourself the opportunity to make the decision about whether you want to keep going forward in the hiring process by applying just broadly as possible. You don't know how competitive the searches are going to be, so I would apply very broadly. Now, if there are honestly places that you wouldn't want to go geographically, or if there are institutions where you don't think you could be successful because of the resources they have, you might limit it that way. But I certainly would apply to any place that looks like it has a place that's reasonable for you to go and where they would have the resources that you could make use of and be successful in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Awesome. Any other questions before we call it? Okay, great. Well, so we will share the recording of this as well as Lance has offered to provide his slides as well. So I'll send those around. So just a couple last, reminders that we have this call every month, and we like to have, someone give a talk on the research or professional development, things like this. So both volunteer to give talks and reach out and let us know if you would like more things like this, what you might want to hear about, and we'll try to make that happen for you guys. And for anybody on this call who may have heard about this through word of mouth and things like that, if you're not already a member of the LISA Early Career Scientists, join. You can either join as a core member if you're part of the LISA consortium as a core member, or you can just, if you join as a community member, you can be on the mailing list and get announcements for things like this. So definitely do that. And we look forward to seeing you guys next month. And let's thank Lance again for his excellent talk.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.